We have all night. The Ptolemaic dynasty, Egypt's last breath. Our beginning is Egypt, but not the Egypt of the pharaohs, the Egypt of the Macedonians. After Alexander the Great died, his empire was divided into pieces, and Egypt fell to his general Ptolemy. Ptolemy was a Macedonian commander. He was an Egyptian, but he worshipped Egypt's gods, sat on the pharaoh's throne, and thus the Ptolemaic dynasty began. From 305 BC to 30 BC, almost 300 years. You know what the biggest characteristic of this dynasty was? Sibling marriages. Brothers and sisters married each other. Why? Because they believed in the purity of bloodlines. It was the tradition of pharaonic families, but at the same time, it was to prevent other families from entering the throne. Think about it for a moment. You're a princess. You're 13 years old. They tell you you're going to marry your brother. What would you feel? Shock, disgust, or just acceptance? Because this is your duty for the continuity of the family. We're coming to the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Cleopatra. You've heard her name. It's one of the most famous women in history. But the real Cleopatra wasn't like in Hollywood movies. Cleopatra ascended the throne at 18, together with her brother and husband, Ptolemy the 13th. Yes, her brother and husband were the same person, but Ptolemy was only 10 years old. His power was in the hands of the palace elders. Cleopatra was smart, very smart. She knew 9 languages. She studied mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and politics. She became very skilled in politics, but she was alone. No one in the palace was truly loyal to her. Everyone thought of their own interests. Cleopatra had to seek allies to survive. She found these allies in Rome. Julius Caesar. When Rome's most powerful man came to Egypt, Cleopatra saw her opportunity. She had herself wrapped in a carpet and smuggled into Caesar's room. Legend or truth? Maybe a bit of both. But the result, Caesar fell in love with Cleopatra. Was it really love? Or was it interest? Maybe both. Maybe Cleopatra was using Caesar, but maybe Caesar was using her too. Maybe they both knew they needed each other. And maybe that need turned into love over time. Who can know? Caesar removed Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy, from the throne. Cleopatra became Egypt's sole ruler. Edessa, Caesarian. The name meant Little Caesar. Cleopatra said this child's father was Caesar. And she proclaimed to the world, this child is the heir of both Rome and Egypt. But Caesar was killed in the Roman Senate, stabbed by his friends. Cleopatra was in Rome at the time. What did she feel when she heard? Fear? Sadness? Or did she just think, I need to make a new plan? Then came Marcus Antonius, one of Caesar's commanders. Rome was now ruled by 3 men, Antonius, Octavianus, and Lepidus. Antonius summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus for a meeting and interrogation. Cleopatra came, but how did she come? On a gold-plated ship with purple sails, decorated with pearls and silks. She presented herself like the goddess Aphrodite. Antonius was enchanted the moment he saw her. Their story is told as one of history's most passionate love stories. But is this the truth? Or was this also politics? Cleopatra bore Antonius 3 children, twins, then a son. Even their names were significant: Sun, Moon, and Ptolemy. The world, the sky, the future. But in Rome, Octavianus was growing stronger. He declared Antonius an enemy. He's fallen under Cleopatra's spell. He's forgotten Rome, he said. The Battle of Actium, 31 BC. Antonius and Cleopatra's fleet against Octavianus's fleet. The battle was going badly. And suddenly, Cleopatra's ships left the battlefield, fled. Why? Historians still debate. Was she afraid? Or was it a plan? Antonius followed Cleopatra, leaving his army behind, following the woman he loved. Was this love? Maybe it was love in its purest form, because Antonius abandoned everything: power, honor, his army, just to be with Cleopatra. But their end was tragic. Octavianus besieged Egypt. Cleopatra was trapped in her palace, Antonius beside her. And one day, news came that Cleopatra had died. It was false news, and Antonius believed it and fell on his sword. You know what Cleopatra did when she saw Antonius's body? She cried. Maybe for the first time in her life, she truly cried, because this man had sacrificed everything for her. Then Octavianus wanted to capture Cleopatra. He wanted to take her to Rome and parade her before the people, but Cleopatra didn't allow it. She had dignity. She had a poisonous snake brought. According to legend, Cleopatra let the snake bite her arm and embrace to death. The Ptolemaic dynasty ended like this, with the last pharaoh, Cleopatra. Egypt became a province of Rome. A civilization thousands of years old came to an end. What does this story tell us? It tells me that sometimes love is stronger than power, but at the same time, that love can also blind. Antonius lost everything for Cleopatra, but maybe for the first time in his life, he was truly happy. The Rurik dynasty, Russia's snowy roots. Now I'm taking you north, to the land of cold forests, icy rivers. It's where Russia was born. The year 862. The Eastern Slavs were fighting each other, each tribe drawing its own path. There was chaos, and one day they said, "We need a prince from outside to rule us, to bring order." And they called Rurik. He was a Varangian prince. He carried Viking blood. He came, made Novgorod his capital, and the Rurik dynasty began. The Rurik dynasty lasted from 862 to 1598, 736 years. During this time, Russia took shape. From Kiev to Moscow, from small principalities to a great empire. But the story of the Rurik dynasty is a very bloody story, because Russia wasn't a gentle place. Winters were merciless, lands were vast, enemies were many. Mongols, Tatars, Lithuanians, Poles, I think all of them wanted Russia. Vladimir I, Saint Vladimir. He was the Prince of Kiev, a pagan. But one day he decided he would Christianize Russia. Why? It was mostly political reasons. He needed to form an alliance with the Byzantine Empire. But maybe there was also a search within him. Maybe he was looking for something from the gods, for meaning. The year 988, Vladimir had his people baptized in the Dnieper River. Thousands upon thousands of people entered the icy water. The statues of the old gods were torn down. A new religion, a new identity was born. But have you ever thought, what did those people feel? You've been worshiping your ancestors' gods for years. Then one day, the prince says, "Now you'll believe in a different God." Do you accept it? Of course you do, because the prince's word is command. But maybe something breaks inside you. Maybe at night, secretly, You still pray to the old gods. Then we came to the Mongol invasion. 1237 to 1240. Batah Khan invaded Russia. Cities were burned. People were massacred. Russia remained under the Mongol yoke for almost 250 years. This period changed Russia, hardened it. Russians learned to be ruthless to survive, just like the Mongols. Ivan III, Ivan the Great. He was the Prince of Moscow. He broke the Mongol yoke. He united Russia. He declared himself Tsar of all Russia. Ivan was strong, intelligent, but at the same time merciless, because in Russia, mercy was seen as weakness. Be strong, or you'll be defeated. Then came Ivan's grandson, Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible. Ivan was a child when his family was killed. Power struggles in the palace, intrigues. Little Ivan grew up in fear. He trusted no one, and when he grew up, that fear turned to rage. Ivan, when he ascended the throne, first did good things. He made reforms, strengthened the army, gained territory. But then he became paranoid. Oprichina, a secret police organization Ivan established. They wore black clothes, rode black horses, and on Ivan's command, they would find and kill traitors. But who was a traitor? Whoever Ivan saw as a traitor. Maybe just someone he suspected. Maybe someone he saw in a dream. Thousands of people died just because of suspicion. Ivan's greatest tragedy was killing his own son, with his own hand. One day, they argued. Ivan got angry, raised his staff, and struck. His son, Ivan Yaroslavich, fell to the ground, died when the bleeding couldn't be stopped. When Ivan realized he had killed him, he screamed. He cried for days. He hugged his son's body, shouting, "I killed my son. I killed my son." There are paintings depicting this scene. Ivan holding his son, his eyes filled with horror, 'cause in that moment he realized what he had done, but he couldn't take it back. Ivan died in 1584. He was alone when he died. Ivan the Terrible finally died in terror. Maybe in that moment, he thought about everything he had done in his life, the people he killed, his son, and maybe he regretted it. But it was too late. The Rurik dynasty ended with Ivan's son, Fyodor. Fyodor was weak, sickly. He died in 1598, had no children, and the Rurik line came to an end. Then Russia entered the time of troubles. 15 years of chaos, civil war, famine. Finally, in 1613, the Romanov dynasty ascended the throne. What's the lesson of the Rurik dynasty? It shows me how power can change a person. Ivan might have been a good man at the beginning, but fear drives him mad. In the end, he destroys even those he loves. Capet and Valois, the foundations of France. Now I'm taking you to France. It's the land of chateaux, knights, love, and honor. The year 987. Hugh Capet became king of France. It was actually a small count, but he was elected as king. And thus the Capetian dynasty began. The Capetian dynasty laid the foundation of France from 987 to 1328, 341 years. Then came the Valois dynasty, a branch of the Capetes, from 1328 to 1589. The period of these dynasties is the period of medieval France. Knights, castle, sieges, crusades. At the same time, is the period of love and literature. Troubadours, love poems, courtly romances. In France, there was a concept called courtly love. Court love. Knight falls in love with a married lady, but can never possess her. It was a platonic love. Actually, there was pain in it, 'cause they couldn't be together. Why such a thing? Maybe people had understood that love exists not only in the body, but also in the soul. Maybe unattainable love seemed pure. Who knows? Philip Augustus, Philip II, one of the most powerful kings of the Capetians. He went on a crusade with King Richard, the Lionheart of England. But they weren't friends. They were rivals. Richard and Philip. Both were young, strong, ambitious. Maybe they respected each other, but they didn't trust each other. Even on the crusade, they were plotting against each other. Philip returned early from the crusade. He came to France and attacked Richard's lands. Richard was captured on his way back from the crusade. Philip supported Richard's brother, John. Let John be king, and I'll take his lands, he thought. But Richard was eventually freed, and he fought with Philip. They fought, made peace, fought again, till Richard was hit by an arrow in battle. Philip lived long, and he strengthened France. Expanded its territories, beautified Paris. Then we came to Louis IX, Saint Louis, one of France's most beloved kings. Why? Because he wasn't just powerful, he was also just. Louis would listen to his people's problems. In Paris, he would sit under an oak tree. Anyone could come and tell their complaint. Poor or rich, Louis would listen to everyone. Think about it. You're a peasant. The king is sitting under a tree, listening to you. What would you feel? Maybe you'd be amazed. Maybe you couldn't believe it. But maybe you'd say, this is what a true king is. Louis went on to crusades. He failed in both. On the second expedition, he died of plague in Tunis. Even as he was dying, he was praying to God. Louis was canonized after his death because his people loved him. Not just because he was powerful, but because he was good. Then we came to Philip IV, Philip le Bel, Philip the Fair. But his beauty hid the darkness within him. Philip loved money. To finance wars, he raised taxes. He challenged the Pope. He destroyed the Knights Templar, the Templars, a knight order founded during the Crusades. They were very rich. Churches, castles, gold, they had everything. Philip wanted that wealth. Friday, October 13th, 1307. Philip raided all the Templars in France at the same time. Thousands of knights were arrested, tortured. Confess, you worship the devil, they said. But what did the Templars do? Some confessed, just to stop the pain. Some resisted, until death. The Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, was burned alive. As he was dying, he cursed Philip and the Pope. Within a year, you too will die, he said. And indeed, within a year, both died. Coincidence? Maybe. But people believed the curse was real. Philip had 3 sons. All 3 became king, but none had male children. And in 1328, the direct line of the Capetian dynasty ended. Then the Valois dynasty began. Philip VI was the first king of Valois. During the Valois period, the 100 Years' War began. France and England fought for 100 years. 100 years. Think, your grandfather went to war. Your father went to war. You're going to war too. A war that never ends. And in the middle of this war, a girl appeared. Jean d'Arc. Jean was a peasant girl. She was a peasant girl. She was 17 years old. "Okay," she said. She heard God's voice. "Say France," the voice said. And Jean believed. She went to the king. "Give me an army. I'll defeat the English," she said. Everyone laughed at her. But the king was desperate. Maybe it's possible, he thought. And Jean went with the army to the siege of Orleans, and she won. It was like a miracle. The soldiers believed in her. "God is with us," they said. But Jean's end was tragic. She was captured, handed over to the English. She was accused of witchcraft. She was burned. She was 19 years old. As Jean was dying, she cried out Jesus' name. The people cried, because Jean wasn't just a commander. She was hope. She was the soul of France. The Valois dynasty ended in 1589 with the assassination of Henry III. Then came the Bourbon dynasty. What's the lesson of Capet and Valois? It shows me the power of honor, justice, and faith. Louis's justice, Jean's faith. These are things more lasting than power. The Tudor dynasty, England's dark royals England, the year 1485. The Wars of the Roses had just ended. The Lancaster and York families fought for 30 years. For the throne, for power, they shed blood. And finally, Henry Tudor won. He defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth. And he ascended the throne as Henry VII. The Tudor dynasty began. And England would never be the same again. Henry VII was a clever man, not a warrior. A man of accounting. He managed money well, avoided war. He brought stability to England. But Henry was a cold man, even distant with his sons. Maybe his childhood had hardened him. He grew up in exile, always lived under threat. He hadn't learned to trust. Henry had 2 sons, Arthur and Henry. Arthur was the eldest heir to the throne, but he died at 15, disease, and thus young Henry became heir. Young Henry, Henry VIII, the most famous, perhaps most infamous king in English history. Henry VIII, when he ascended the throne, was young, handsome, athletic. He wrote poetry, played music. Everyone loved him. The golden age has begun, the people said. Henry married his brother Arthur's widow, Catherine of Aragon. Permission had been obtained from the papacy, 'cause normally you couldn't marry your brother-in-law for political reasons. For an alliance with Spain, the marriage was made. Catherine was a beautiful, faithful woman. She loved Henry, but she had one problem. She couldn't bear a male child. She had daughters, but they didn't survive. Only Mary lived. Henry wanted a male heir. In those days, if the king didn't have a male child, it would be a disaster. The dynasty would weaken. Throne struggles would arise. and Henry fell in love with a young woman, Anne Boleyn. Anne wasn't beautiful, but she was captivating, intelligent, lively, different. Henry became infatuated with her. "I'm going to marry her," he said. But he couldn't divorce Catherine. The Pope wouldn't allow it, because Catherine was the niece of the King of Spain. The Pope couldn't offend Spain. You know what Henry did? He broke ties with the Pope. He established the Church of England. He declared himself head of the church, and he divorced Catherine. This wasn't just a marriage matter. It meant England breaking away from the Catholic world. Monasteries were closed, priests were expelled, church lands were confiscated. It was a revolution. Henry married Anne. Anne became pregnant. Everyone expected a male child. Prayers were said in the palace. Preparations were made. "The prince is coming," they said. But the child born was a girl, Elizabeth. Henry was disappointed, but he thought, well, next time it'll be a boy. But Anne couldn't bear another male child. She had miscarriages, and Henry's love slowly turned to hatred. 3 years later, Henry was tired of Anne. But how would he get rid of her? He had already divorced once. A second time would be too difficult. So he had to find another way. Anne was accused of treason. Treason against the king, incest, witchcraft. They were ridiculous charges. But Henry wanted this. The court found Anne guilty. May 1536. Anne Boleyn was executed in the Tower of London. Her head was cut off with a sword. Her last words were, "The king has been a very good husband to me." Irony, or a final mercy. Maybe Anne was thinking of her daughter Elizabeth. "If I speak badly of her father, it will harm my daughter," she thought. A mother, even in her last breath, trying to protect her child. Henry married 11 days after Anne died, to Jane Seymour. Jane was a quiet, obedient woman. This is what Henry wanted now. He didn't want headaches, just a male child. And Jane gave Henry a son, Edward. Henry was overjoyed. Finally, he had his male heir. But Jane died 12 days after giving birth. Infection. Henry was truly saddened. He referred to Jane as my true wife in later years. Maybe because she had given him a male child. Or maybe because he didn't have time to do evil to her. Henry married 3 more times. He married Anne of Cleves, but didn't like her, divorced her. He married Catherine Howard, but she too was accused of treason, killed. He married Catherine Parr, and she was lucky. She was still alive when Henry died. 6 wives, 2 beheaded, 2 divorced, 1 died, 1 survived. Boz, the English wrote a rhyme to remember this. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Henry, at the end of his life, was a fat, sick, suffering man. He had a non-healing wound on his leg. It smelled. His character had deteriorated. He was paranoid. Everyone was afraid of him. He died in 1547. He was 56 years old. His children remained Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. Edward ascended the throne at 9 years old, but he was a weak, sickly child. He died at 16. Maybe tuberculosis, maybe poison. No one knows for sure. Then Mary ascended the throne. They call her Bloody Mary because she was Catholic and burned Protestants, hundreds of them. Mary was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She had seen how her mother was humiliated. She herself had been disinherited, declared a bastard. She had suffered, and that pain had hardened her. Mary married Spanish Prince Philip, but there was no love between them. Philip wanted to draw England to Spain's side. Mary just wanted love. Mary thought she was pregnant several times, but they were phantom pregnancies. There was no child, only disease. Cancer was growing in her belly. She died in 1558. She was 42 years old. She was alone when she died. Philip had left. The people didn't love her. She went down in history as Bloody Mary. But maybe Mary was just a woman looking for love. No one gave it to her, so she gave rage in return. Then Elizabeth ascended the throne, Anne Boleyn's daughter. Now the story really begins. Elizabeth was 25 years old, red-haired, pale-skinned, sharp-eyed. She was intelligent, very intelligent. She knew 6 languages. She knew history, philosophy, mathematics, but most importantly, she knew how to survive. Her childhood was a nightmare. Her mother was killed. She was declared a bastard. She was imprisoned in the Tower of London by her half-sister. She lived in constant fear of death. It's taught her, trust no one, protect yourself, be strong. When Elizabeth ascended the throne, everyone expected her to marry, because a queen couldn't rule a country alone, or so it was believed in those days. She needed a husband, a king. But Elizabeth said, I am married to England, and she never married. Why? Maybe she was afraid. She had seen what her father did. She had seen how marriage weakened women. She had seen the fate of her mother, her stepmothers. Or maybe she was in love. Robert Dudley, Elizabeth's childhood friend. Handsome, intelligent, ambitious. Elizabeth was in love with him, but Dudley was married, And then his wife died mysteriously, fell down the stairs. Everyone gossiped. Dudley killed her to marry the queen. Elizabeth couldn't marry Dudley now, because people would say the queen was complicit in murder. Elizabeth and Dudley loved each other for life, but they never married. They just remained friends, or maybe more. No one knows. But when Dudley died, Elizabeth kept his letter, labeled it his last letter. She carried it with her until she died. Elizabeth's reign was England's golden age. Shakespeare wrote during this period. Francis Drake circumnavigated the world. The Spanish Armada was defeated, but Elizabeth had her secrets too. Mary, Queen of Scots, Queen of Scotland, Elizabeth's cousin, and another claimant to the throne. Mary was beautiful, attractive, but an unlucky woman. She married 3 times, 3 times disaster. Her second husband was murdered. Her third husband might have been the killer. The Scots rebelled against Mary. She fled to England. Elizabeth imprisoned Mary for 19 years. Mary, in her cell, slowly aged, lost her hopes. Finally, Mary was implicated in a plot, a plan to kill Elizabeth. Was it real? Had Mary really participated? Maybe, or maybe it was a trap. Elizabeth didn't want to kill Mary, Because Mary was a queen. Killing a queen set a dangerous precedent. Her advisors insisted, if she doesn't die, you will. February 1587. Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded. She was 44 years old. Her last words were prayers to Jesus. She wore a gray dress, but underneath was a red nightgown, the color of martyrdom. When the executioner lifted Mary's head, her wig remained in his hand. Her head fell to the ground. Mary was actually gray, old. All her beauty was gone, but her eyes were still open, as if taking one last look at the world. Elizabeth deeply regretted signing Mary's death warrant, or so she said at least. She exiled the secretary who signed the order. I didn't want it, she said, but of course she did. She just didn't want anyone to blame her. Elizabeth died in 1603. She was 70 years old. She remained unmarried until her death. They called her the Virgin Queen. The state of Virginia in America was named after her. When Elizabeth died, she had no children. The Tudor line ended. Throne passed to King James of Scotland, Mary, Queen of Scots' son. Isn't that ironic? Elizabeth killed Mary, but in the end, Mary's son ascended the throne. What's the lesson of the Tudor dynasty? It shows me that power brings loneliness. Henry married 6 times, but was never happy. Elizabeth gave up her love, but preserved her kingdom. Power in the Habsburg dynasty, Europe's secret rulers. Now, I'm taking you to the heart of Europe. To Austria, to Spain, to the Holy Roman Empire, to the Habsburg dynasty. The Habsburgs are one of the longest-lived dynasties in European history. From 1273 to 1918, 645 years. But the Habsburgs' power wasn't in war. It was in intelligence, in marriages. There's a saying, let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. The Habsburgs conquered Europe through strategic marriages. A prince here, a princess there. Slowly, all of Europe became related by Habsburg blood. But this strategy had a price. Cousin marriages. Too many cousin marriages. You know, cousin marriages lead to genetic problems. Okay? In the Habsburgs, this was very clearly visible. The Habsburg jaw, protruding jaw, abnormal structure. Generation after generation, it got worse. Charles V, Emperor Charles, one of the most powerful Habsburg emperors, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, ruler of the Netherlands. He was the ruler of an empire on which the sun never set. But Charles was an unhappy man. His jaw was so large he couldn't close his mouth properly. His speech was unintelligible. He had difficulty eating. Charles fought all his life against Protestants, against the French, against the Ottomans. He never stopped, but he couldn't win. He couldn't unite Europe, couldn't destroy Protestantism. At 56, he was tired. He gave up everything. He abdicated, retired to a monastery. There, he lived alone. He only worked with clocks, setting them, stopping them. Maybe he was trying to control time, the thing he couldn't control all his life. He died 2 years later. When he was dying, he had his wife's coffin brought to him, had it opened. He looked at his wife's corpse. Why? Maybe he wanted to know death. Maybe he didn't want to be afraid anymore. Charles's son, Philip II, King of Spain, an even more devout, even harsher man. Philip did everything to protect Catholicism. He supported the Inquisition. Thousands of people were tried, burned. For God, Philip said. But maybe for control. Philip also made cousin marriages. He married 4 times. His first wife, his own cousin. Their children died early. His second wife, Mary Tudor, from England. But there was no love, only politics. Mary died. They had no children. His third wife, another relative. And from this marriage, Don Carlos was born. Don Carlos, a tragic prince. When he was born, it was a difficult birth. His mother died. As a child, he fell downstairs, hit his head. He was operated on, miraculously survived. But afterwards, he changed. Carlos became a cruel, unstable young man. He tortured animals. He treated servants badly. Hated his father, Philip. Philip didn't want to make Carlos heir to the throne. But what would he do? Would he exile his son? 1568, Carlos was arrested by his father's order. He was imprisoned. He died 6 months later. Official explanation: illness, but rumors. He was poisoned. Did Philip kill his own son? No one knows, but it's possible. Philip married a 4th time, again with a relative, Anna of Austria. They had children, but many died early. Only 3 survived. Philip died in 1598. He was 71 years old. When he was dying, he was suffering. His body was covered with sores. It smelled, but couldn't be treated. But until his last breath, he said, "It's God's work. These pains are atonement for my sins." After Philip, the Spanish Habsburgs slowly collapsed, because cousin marriages had weakened the line. Charles II, Spain's last Habsburg king. They called him the Bewitched because he was so ill, people thought he was cursed. Charles's jaw was twice the size of a normal jaw. He couldn't eat, couldn't speak. He was mentally disabled. He had difficulty walking. He married twice, but he couldn't have children because he had physiological problems, the result of cousin marriages. He died in 1700. He was 39 years old. He had no children. The Spanish Habsburgs ended. The Austrian Habsburgs continued. Maria Theresa, the only female Habsburg ruler, strong, intelligent, determined. She had 16 children. Everywhere in Europe, her children married kings and queens. But Maria Theresa also continued cousin marriages. Because Habsburg blood must remain pure, she said. Her youngest daughter, Marie Antoinette, King Louis XVI of France. And you know her end? The guillotine. The Habsburgs ended in 1918. In World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. The last emperor, Charles I, abdicated. What's the lesson of the Habsburgs? It shows me the danger of purity. If you close yourself off to preserve bloodlines, you slowly rot. Diversity is necessary for survival. Closure leads to the end. The Romanov dynasty, Russia's glorious final act. We're returning to Russia, but this time a different Russia. The last and most glorious dynasty of Tsarist Russia, The Romanovs. The year 1613. Russia is emerging from the time of troubles. 15 years of chaos, civil war, famine. Country was in pieces, And the boyars, Russian nobles, gathered and decided, we must elect a new Tsar, Mikhail Romanov. He was a 16-year-old youth, not at all ready to be king. But his family was powerful, and most importantly, they weren't enemies to anyone. Until when Mikhail became Tsar, he cried, I can't do it, he said. His mother said, this is God's work, you must accept. And Mikhail accepted. The Romanov dynasty began like this, with a young man's tears. The Romanovs ruled Russia for 300 years. From 1613 to 1917. During this time, Russia transformed from a village country into a world power. Peter the Great, the most famous Tsar of the Romanovs. Peter, as a child, saw terrible things. There was a revolt in the palace. The Streltsy, the Tsar's guards, rebelled. Before Peter's eyes, his relatives were killed. He watched the massacre from the window. He was 10 years old. This trauma shaped Peter. I must be strong, or they'll kill me, he thought. When Peter ascended the throne, Russia was backward, 100 years behind Europe. Peter said, I'm going to change this. A Russian Tsar, for the first time in history, went abroad. He went to the Netherlands, to England. He worked in shipyards, built ships, with his own hands. The Tsar, wearing workers' clothes, working. When he returned, he started changing Russia. He cut the boyars' beards by force. You will be European style, he said. The boyars were shocked. The beard was sacred in Orthodox tradition, but Peter didn't care. He founded a new city, St. Petersburg, European style, a modern capital. Thousands of serfs worked on the construction. Thousands died, but Peter didn't care. Russia will have a window to Europe, he said. Peter also had his own son killed, Alexei, because Alexei was against his father's reforms. We should return to old Russia, he said. Peter saw this as treason. Alexei was tortured, died. His father didn't even attend his son's funeral. Peter died at 63. He had tried to rescue drowning soldiers in an icy river, had gotten sick. In his final days, he suffered, but he didn't regret. I made Russia strong, he said. Catherine the Great. But she wasn't Russian. She was a German princess, Sophie von Anhalt-Zerbst. At 16, she came to Russia. She married Tsar Peter III, Peter the Great's grandson. But Peter III was a weak, childish man. Catherine despised him. 17 years later, Catherine staged a coup. She deposed her husband. Peter III died a week later. They said accident, but he was probably murdered. Catherine became empress, and she ruled Russia for 33 years as an enlightened despot. Catherine was intelligent, cultured. She corresponded with Voltaire. She supported art and literature. She turned St. Petersburg into a cultural capital. But at the same time, she was ruthless. When peasants rebelled, she crushed them. The Pugachev Rebellion. Thousands of peasants were killed. The leader, Yemelin Pugachev, was captured and dismembered while alive. Catherine's love life was also famous. She had many lovers, young, handsome men. Gossip swirled in the palace. But Catherine didn't care. If a male Tsar does this, no one talks. Why should they talk? Because I'm a woman, she said. Catherine died at 67. She had suffered a stroke in her bathroom. Her son Paul ascended the throne. Paul, a gloomy, paranoid man. His mother hadn't loved him, had always belittled him, had hurt Paul. Paul reigned only 5 years. Then he was killed. Another coup. His son, Alexander, knew about his father's murder. Maybe he even approved, but afterwards he felt guilt for life. Alexander I fought against Napoleon. he defended Russia. 1812. Napoleon captured Moscow. But Moscow was burned. The Russians retreated. When winter came, Napoleon had to retreat. Most of his army died from hunger, from cold. Alexander said, "God protected us." He became religious, mystical. He died in 1825. Some say he didn't die, secretly retired to a monastery. Nicholas I was a harsh Tsar. They called him the Iron Tsar. He crushed revolutionaries, stopped reforms. Then Alexander II, the Liberator Tsar. He freed the serfs in 1861. There were 20 million serfs in Russia. They became free in one day. But it wasn't enough. Revolutionaries said, more reforms are needed. The Tsardom must end. 7 assassination attempts were made on Alexander II. The 7th time, they succeeded. 1881, in St. Petersburg, a bomb. Alexander was wounded, died from blood loss. His son, Alexander III, stopped the reforms. My father was soft. He was killed. I'll be harsh, he said. And then Nicholas II, the last Tsar of the Romanovs. Nicholas was 26 when he ascended the throne, young, inexperienced. I'm not ready, he said, just like Mikhail, 300 years before. Nicholas could have been a good man. He loved his family, loved his country, but he was weak. He couldn't make decisions, and the people around him misled him. Alexandra, Nicholas's wife, a German princess, beautiful, but cold. Russians didn't love her, a foreigner, they said. Alexandra and Nicholas had 5 children, 4 girls, 1 boy. Alexei, heir to the throne, but Alexei had hemophilia. His blood wouldn't clot. The smallest cut could kill him. Alexandra was desperate. Doctors couldn't do anything. And one day, Rasputin appeared. Grigory Rasputin, a peasant, a holy man, strange, dirty, but mesmerizing, He claimed that with God's power, he could heal. And indeed, Rasputin seemed to heal Alexei. How? No one knows. Maybe hypnosis, maybe luck. But Alexandra believed. Rasputin was sent by God, she said. Rasputin grew powerful in the palace. He gave advice to the empress. He interfered in politics. The people hated him. The empress is under a peasant's spell, they said. 1916, Rasputin was killed. A group of nobles poisoned him, shot him, drowned him, according to legend. He was very hard to kill, but it was too late. Russia was on the brink of collapse. World War I. Russia was taking heavy casualties. The people were hungry. In 1917, the February Revolution. Nicholas abdicated. The Romanov dynasty ended. But the story wasn't over yet. Nicholas and his family were taken prisoner. First to a palace, then exiled to Siberia. The Bolsheviks came to power in July 1918. One night in Yekaterinburg, in a basement, Nicholas, Alexandra, 5 children, and a few servants. They were shot. All of them. Alexei was 13 years old. The youngest daughter, Anastasia, was 17. Bullets to their chests, their heads. A cruelty. But it wasn't that quick, because the princesses had sewn jewels into their dresses for protection. The jewels stopped the bullets. They were finally killed with bayonets. The bodies were burned, thrown into a pit. The world didn't know what happened for years. They were just missing. For years, rumors circulated. Anastasia survived, they said. Women appeared, saying, I am Anastasia. But they were all liars. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the bodies were found. DNA tests were done. The Romanov family was identified. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized them. Innocent martyrs, they said. What's the lesson of the Romanovs? It shows me the danger of weakness. Nicholas was a good man, but a weak leader. And weak leadership leads to disaster. Sometimes being good isn't enough. You must also be strong. The Medici dynasty, Florence's secret rulers, Italy. It's the lands where the Renaissance was born. But you know what? Behind the Renaissance, there was a banking family, the Medici. Florence, in the 15th century, was a small city-state, hid in wealth, in art, in culture. It would become the center of the world. And the power behind this was a family that didn't wear crowns. Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici, a banker, a modest man. But he was intelligent. He became the Pope's banker, and his money began to flow like water. When Giovanni died, he told his sons, "Don't show off, stay quiet, but keep power in your hands." Cosimo de' Medici, Giovanni's son, Pater Patri, father of the fatherland, they would call him later. But at the beginning, he was just a wealthy banker. Cosimo never officially ruled Florence. He didn't become Doge, didn't become king, but everyone knew he was the real ruler of Florence. 'Cause with his money, he controlled everything. Elections, decisions, wars. Cosimo's power didn't come only from money. It came from his intelligence, his strategy. And from one more thing, art. Cosimo supported artists. He had Donatello make sculptures. He had Brunelleschi build the cathedral dome. It still stands in Florence, that dome, challenging the sky. Why? Just to be beautiful? No, because art was a demonstration of power. It meant I'm wealthy enough, cultured enough, powerful enough to do this. Cosimo was once exiled. His rivals threw him out. But a year later, he was called back. Because without him, Florence had begun to collapse. There was no money. Trade had stopped. Without the Medici, Florence was nothing. And Cosimo returned. You know what he did? He didn't take revenge. He just smiled. 'Cause now everyone knew, without the Medici, Florence couldn't survive. Lorenzo, Il Magnifico, Lorenzo the Magnificent, Cosimo's grandson, Cosimi's golden age came with him. Lorenzo took over the family business at 20, young, handsome, charismatic, poet, musician, athlete. He was everything. But at the same time, he was a ruthless politician. 'Cause in Florence, being soft meant death. The Pazzi conspiracy. 1478. Another wealthy family of Florence, the Pazzis, attacked the Medici in church during Mass. Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano were stabbed while praying together. Giuliano died 19 stab wounds, but Lorenzo escaped, hid. The streets of Florence were bathed in blood that day. The people supported the Medici. The Pazzi family was hunted down. Some were hanged from windows. Some were torn apart in the streets. It was merciless, savage. But Lorenzo allowed it, 'cause he needed to send a message. The Medici are untouchable. Lorenzo's greatest achievement was maintaining peace. The Italian city-states were constantly fighting, but Lorenzo balanced it with diplomacy. They called it the balance of Italy. And the art. Oh, the art. Lorenzo took Michelangelo into his home when he was only 14. This boy is a genius, he said. Michelangelo grew up in the Medici palace, learned to carve marble. Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Verrocchio, Lay, all worked with Medici support. The greatest works of the Renaissance were made with Medici money. But Lorenzo had a problem. He got sick, gout, His joints swelled. He suffered. He died at 43. When Lorenzo died, Florence wept, because Lorenzo wasn't just a ruler. He was the soul of Florence. Then came Piero, Lorenzo's son. But Piero wasn't like his father. He was weak, indecisive. When the French attacked Florence, Piero surrendered. The people rebelled. Medici were expelled. 18 years. The Medici in exile. Florence in chaos. Savonarola, a monk, a preacher, took over Florence, not with force, but with words. Repent, he shouted. Give up luxury, art, sin. Florence became puritanical. Works of art were burned. They called it bonfire of the vanities. Even Botticelli threw his own paintings into the fire, out of guilt. But Savonarola went too far. He challenged the Pope, and finally he was burned. 1498. In the same square where he had held his bonfires of vanities, he himself was burned. The Medici returned, but this time it was different. They produced two popes, Leo X and Clement VII. Now they ruled not only Florence, but the Catholic world. But becoming pope didn't bring blessing. During Clement's time, Rome was sacked minus 1527. Germans and Spanish stormed Rome, burned it, destroyed it. Clement fled, hid. Then we came to Catherine de' Medici. She married King Henry II of France. When her husband died in a tournament, a lance pierced his eye. Catherine grew powerful. Catherine put her 3 sons on the throne of France. She ruled in all their names. They called her Queen Mother, but some called her the Black Queen, because during Catherine's time, the wars of religion began. Catholics and Protestants bathed France in blood. The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. 1572. In Paris, there was a wedding. Catholic and Protestant nobles had come together for peace. But at night, bells rang. A signal was given, and Catholics massacred Protestants. Thousands of people died. The streets were painted with blood. What was Catherine's role? Historians still debate. Did she give the order, or did she just allow it? Maybe she tried to prevent it, but couldn't. Who could know? Catherine died at 1609. She was alone when she died. Her sons had abandoned her. France didn't love her. They called her Italian witch. The Medici in Florence ended in 1737. The last Medici, Anna Maria Luisa, she had no children. But she left a will. All the Medici art collection will remain in Florence. It will never be sold, never moved. Today, museums in Florence are full of the Medici collection. Michelangelo's David, Botticelli's Venus. They're all there because Anna Maria gave her final gift. Let our art remain for the world, she said. What's the lesson of the Medici? It shows me that power doesn't come only from armies. It also comes from culture, art, intelligence. And maybe that power is more lasting, because the Medici army is gone now. But their art still lives. Ottoman Dynasty, the empire's 600-year confidants. Now I'm taking you east, both sides of the Bosphorus, to where 3 continents meet, to the Ottoman Empire. 1299, Turkish Bey Osman founded a small beylik, Anatolia, on the border of Byzantine lands. No one could know that this small beylik would turn into an empire that would last 600 years. The Ottoman dynasty lasted from 1299 to 1922, 623 years, much longer than the Romanovs, the Tudors, even the Medici. But the Ottomans had a special feature: fratricide. Yes, as you heard. When a prince ascended the throne, he had the right to kill his brothers. By law, for the survival of the state, they said. So brothers wouldn't cause throne struggles. A terrible tradition, isn't it? But in the Ottoman Empire, the state was more important than everything. Even family ties were secondary beside the state. Mehmed II, the conqueror, the most famous of conquerors. Mehmed conquered Istanbul at 1453. The Byzantine Empire, standing for 1,000 years, fell with a young sultan's determination. A 53-day siege, cannons, ships, tunnels. The Byzantines resisted, but Mehmed was more determined. "I will take this city, or I will die here," he said. And one morning, May 29th, the walls broke. Ottoman soldiers flooded into the city. Istanbul fell. When Mehmed entered Hagia Sophia, he knelt. He thanked Allah. Then he looked inside. Mosaics, domes. "This is now a mosque," he said. But Mehmed wasn't just a warrior. He was a poet, philosopher, art lover. He knew 8 languages. He brought Italian painters, had his portrait painted. The portrait of Mehmed the Conqueror is displayed in London today. Turban, robes, and a thoughtful gaze. Mehmed had another secret. He didn't love his son, Sim Sultan. Why? Because Sim was his mother's son. But Mehmed, perhaps, loved another woman more. Palace intrigue can cool even a father's heart. Mehmed died at 52. Was he poisoned? Some say so, but it's not certain. Then Bayezid ascended the throne, but his brother Sim rebelled. "I should also be sultan," he said. They fought. Sim lost. He fled to Europe. Sim lived as a prisoner in Europe. The Pope used him as leverage against Bayezid. "I'll release Sim, send him against you," he threatened. Sim died at 40, in Naples. Poison, disease, unknown. But it was tragic. A prince died far from his homeland, alone. Suleiman, the lawgiver. They call him Suleiman the Magnificent in Europe. Suleiman's period was the Ottoman Golden Age. The empire reached its widest borders, to Vienna, to North Africa, to the Persian Gulf. But Suleiman's story is also a story of love and tragedy. Harem Sultan. In the West, they call her Roxolana, a concubine. A young girl kidnapped from Ukraine. She was brought to the palace, and Suleiman fell in love with her. He didn't just fall in love, he married her. This was unprecedented, because sultans normally didn't marry concubines. But Suleiman broke tradition. "She is my wife," he said. Harem was intelligent, ambitious. She won Suleiman's heart, but she also wanted the sultanate for her sons. Suleiman had a son from his first marriage, Mustafa, handsome, brave, intelligent. The people loved him. Mustafa will be a great sultan, they said. But Harem was afraid of Mustafa. Mustafa ascends the throne, my sons will die, she thought. Because of the law of fratricide, and Harem whispered to Suleiman, Mustafa is betraying you. He's preparing a rebellion, she said. There was no proof. But suspicion was enough. 1553, Suleiman summoned Mustafa to his tent. Mustafa came to show respect to his father. But in the tent, executioners were waiting. Mustafa was strangled. Before his father's eyes, Suleiman watched from behind a curtain. He gave the signal, kill him. When Mustafa's body was brought out, the soldiers cried, screamed, our prince was murdered. But none of them could rebel, because it was the Sultan's order. Suleiman changed after that day. He became melancholic. Maybe he regretted, but never admitted it. Harem won her victory. But she had another son, Bazid. He also rebelled, and he was also killed, along with his children, strangled in one day. Suleiman died at 72, on a campaign in his tent. His death was hidden for 3 weeks, so the army wouldn't be demoralized. What's Suleiman's lesson? Love sometimes blinds. His love for Harem led him to kill his son, and maybe he lived with that pain forever. Then we came to the cage system. Fratricide now seemed too savage. We need to find another way, they said. And they established the cage system. Princes were no longer killed, but they were imprisoned. The cage special rooms in Topkapi Palace. No windows, no way out, only concubines and eunuchs. Princes would live there for years. Some went mad. They forgot the real world. Then, when the Sultan died, they were taken out of the cage, placed on the throne. Think about it. You're a prince. Since childhood, you've lived in a cage. You don't see the sun. You don't talk to people. Then one day, they say, you're Sultan. Are you ready? Of course, you're not. But still, you ascend the throne. Ibrahim. They call him Ibrahim the Mad. He lived in a cage for 24 years. When he ascended the throne, he was paranoid. They're going to kill me, he constantly feared. Ibrahim acted insane. He spent the treasury on concubines. He threw gold into the Bosphorus. One day, he had all his concubines drowned because of a suspicion. Years later, Ibrahim was deposed. He was put back in the cage, and he was strangled. His own mother gave permission. It's necessary for the state, she said. 18th century. The Ottoman is weakening now. Austria, Russia, applying pressure. Its territories being lost. The Tulip era, its period of Ahmed III. Escape from wars, return to pleasure. Istanbul was decorated with tulips, festivals, entertainment. Sif sang, let's forget our troubles, let's live. But the people were hungry. Celebration in the palace, hunger in the streets, they said. A rebellion broke out. Ahmed was deposed. 19th century, it's time of reforms. Tanzimat, the Ottoman, is trying to catch up with Europe. But it's too late. Abdul Hamid II. They call him the Red Sultan. He reigned for 33 years. He was paranoid, but intelligent. He had railways built, telegraphs strung. But Abdulhamid was afraid of freedom. Newspapers were censored. Dissidents exiled. In the palace, Secret police, spies, 1908. The Young Turk Revolution. Officers said, "We want freedom." Abdul Hamid surrendered. Constitutional monarchy was declared, but it was too late. The Ottoman was in collapse. World War I. The Ottomans lost. Mehmed VI Vahiduddin, the last sultan. In 1922, he secretly escaped from Istanbul. He boarded a British ship, went to Malta. The Ottoman dynasty ended like this, with a nighttime escape. A 600-year empire quietly ended. 1924. The entire Ottoman dynasty was exiled from Turkey. Princes, sultans, princesses, all were put on trains, sent to the border. Never come back, they were told. Some lived in Paris, some in Egypt, in poverty, forgotten, in exile. You owned the throne for 6 centuries. Now you are living in a rental. The last Ottoman caliph, Abdülmecid Efendi, died in Paris in 1944, in poverty. His funeral was held in a small mosque. There was no empire anymore, only memories. What's the Ottoman lesson? It shows me that no power lasts forever. 600 years, a long time, but everything has an end, and sometimes that end comes very quietly. In one night, with one ship, with one exile, and there. Now we've truly finished. From the art-filled palaces of the Medici to the Ottoman Empire, spread across 3 continents, we've seen them all. And what did we see? Dynasties aren't just blood ties. They're an idea. The idea that we endure. We are immortal. But it's a lie. No one is immortal. Not people, not dynasties, not empires. The Medici tried to become immortal through beauty. And maybe they succeeded, because their art still lives. The Ottomans tried to become immortal through power, but power eventually ends, and in the end, you quietly disappear. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is what you do during the time you're alive, what you leave behind, you touch. Elizabeth of the Tudors never married, but she left England a golden age. Nicholas of the Romanovs was weak, okay? But he loved his family, stayed with them until the end. Suleiman of the Ottomans killed his son, but maybe he lived his life with that pain. They're all human. They all made mistakes. They all suffered, and they all died, but their stories remained. That's why we tell them today, because stories are humanity's immortality. You too will one day be a story. Maybe you won't be part of a dynasty, but you'll write your own story, and maybe someone will tell it. So live well, love well, be remembered well. Now it's time to sleep. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, okay? And let yourself drift into sleep. Dynasties passed, empires passed, but you're here, now, alive, breathing. Isn't that a miracle too? Good night, sweet dreams.